Well, hi, my name is Sam O'Donnell, and I'm an affiliate faculty member from Southwestern College Professional Studies. We learn more about leadership probably from our mistakes than just about anything else. I can look back across the landscape of my leadership experience and realize that most of the greatest things that I've learned have been a result of mistakes that I made. I remember my first foray into leadership failing miserably, but years later, having learned from that. So let's take a look together at rotten leadership, learning from awful leaders. So there's types of awful leadership, and I'm sure if you've been around the workplace for any length of time, you've seen some, if not all of these, and probably others. This is just a tip of the iceberg. The first one is the Seagull type of leadership, and we'll talk about each one of these individually and learn from each one. Second is a lazy leadership. Number three is absentee. Number four is liar, liar, or the unethical leader. And finally, the take the credit type of leader. Let's look at these a little more in depth. First of all, it's the Seagull leadership. This is the type of leader who flies in, dumps a load of stuff on you, and then flies off. We've all had this happen to us where we've been working away at our job and suddenly a supervisor comes by and says, hey, I need you to do this, and then zooms off, maybe with little to no input about what it is that you need to do. They are in and out as quickly as they can, just long enough to dump it on your desk and leave. How do you avoid this type of leadership? Well, you can't avoid somebody leading you that way, but you could certainly avoid leading somebody else that way. And the key word here is involvement. Make sure the people that you hand a task off to understand the task and know that you're there to assist them. And when you delegate something, don't just dump it on their desk, but walk them through it, talk them through it, help them through it. If they haven't done the job before, they may need a little more coaching. They may need a little more hand-holding, if you will. If they're proficient at a particular task, then you may not need to spend as much time with them. But by all means, don't be the type of Seagull leader that just flies in, drops a project on somebody's desk, and then flies off. The lazy leader. This is the type of leader who will do anything to avoid work. We've worked with these type of people before. A new project starts or there's work to be done. You look around and this person has pulled a Houdini. They have disappeared. These type of leaders typically do not enjoy a great deal of love from the people they work with, because it doesn't take people long to figure out who the lazy leaders are. And if a leader is not willing to do something that they ask somebody else to do, it diminishes, if not destroys, their credibility. So how do you avoid this? Get in there, roll up your sleeves, and do the work. Let me illustrate this for you by a personal story. I learned this kind of by accident. I was working at a base in the upper Midwest, and I had a young man who had just started working for me, and he was a brand new staff sergeant. And it was just he and I in the shop. And I came into the shop one day, and it was a Friday, and he was doing Tidy Friday. He was mopping the floors in our high bay. Well, I let him get about halfway through, and I slipped off my overshirt and was just in my ABU pants and t-shirt and boots, and walked over, tapped him out, and took the mop. I said, "You go take a break." And I finished mopping the floor. And he stood there in the doorway to the break room, looked at me. He says, "I have never seen a senior NCO mop a floor before." I said, "Well, I do." And he just kind of shook his head and walked off. But that was the beginning of a really neat working relationship between the two of us. I could ask him to do most anything, or he could ask me to do most anything, and we'd do it. The counter to lazy leadership is industrious leadership. Be willing to get in there and do what it takes to get the job done, even if you have to set your position aside to be able to do it. The absentee leader. This is the person who's never around. You look around and they have pulled a disappearing act. You cannot find them. No matter what time of the day you go to their office, call their phone, whatever, they're never around. So much of leadership is presence. And in that vein, how do you counter this? Be present, be around, be available for your people. The higher up in leadership that you go, the more visible you will need to be. People appreciate that, and people notice when the leader, especially the senior leader, is not around. And if you want people to make the right decisions and to make the right calls, they have to see you being present and not the absentee leader. Number 4, liar, liar. This is the unethical leader, the person you can never trust to tell the truth, the person whose word is not worth a whole lot. How do you counter this? Be ethical. Tell the truth, even when it's difficult. I used to have a policy, and I would tell my supervisors this, that I have a never surprise the boss policy. And most of my supervisors appreciated it. I would call them and say, hey, this is in the never surprise the boss category. And it was like, okay, what's going on? Well, quality assurance came in and they burned our house down because we got a write-up on this or that. Okay, what'd you tell them? What'd you do? Well, we've done this and this and this. Okay, make sure it doesn't happen again. No problem, boss, we got it handled. 99 times out of 100, telling the truth was a whole lot better than letting the boss get surprised by it. I remember one time I had been misinformed on something, and it shook up to be a very embarrassing type of thing for our shop, our flight, and our squadron. I went over to the flight chief's office and asked her if I could talk to her. She said, sure. I closed the door. She looked at me, her eyes got big. She says, what's up? And I said, boss, I just did something stupid. She said, what'd you do? And I told her. And she says, you know what you did, don't you? I said, yeah, I did. She said, you gonna do that again? I said, absolutely not. She said, okay, you've learned from it. Get out of my office. And that was the end of it. So many times being truthful is the best way to go. And that honesty and that integrity will carry the day for you. In most professional environments, all professional environments I've been in, telling the truth is sought after. And if you're a person who cannot be trusted, your days in that organization are numbered. So let's look at the next one. The glory hog, the person who takes the credit. This is a frustrating type of leader we've all worked with, that at one time or another, that is only around when there's credit to be gotten. They are right there ready to grab the limelight any chance they get. Let me illustrate this with a personal story, and it'll show you how this type of leader affects the morale in an organization. I was stationed in a Middle Eastern location that I cannot divulge, with a group of maintainers from our home base. We had a young man there who was a first-term airman. I think he was a E4 senior airman, 3 stripes, fairly new to the Air Force. But this young man was an A-plus mechanic. He worked on the ground equipment that is used to maintain the aircraft while they're on the ground, to service them. And we had a lot of downtime once the aircraft had taken off, where they flew 2 a day. So each aircraft flew twice daily. So after the launches were done, we had downtime while the aircraft were flying. So we had time to, play games or watch movies or do whatever, read. They wanted us around for the launch and recoveries. So we had a lot of free time on our hands, and this young man took it upon himself to take 2 very complicated pieces of aerospace ground equipment, set them side by side, and take components from one unit, put them on the other, and build up another unit that was functioning. It took him about 3 or 3.5 days, and when he was done, he had this one machine that he had taken parts from dissimilar machines, put them together, and he had the motor purring like a kitten. It just sounded great. He had done such a great job on it. We had this superintendent walk into the maintenance area, look at what he was doing, and say, "What on earth are you wasting your time on that for?" And turn around and walk off. Seagull Leadership. The young man who was expecting praise from the boss and instead got kicked, took the shop rag that he was wiping his hands off on, threw it up over his shoulder and says, "That's it. From now on, he gets a C+ effort," and turned around and walked off, deflated. You can just, his whole countenance changed. This same man who had just deflated this young man's exceptional work would later use that same incident and take credit for it and put it on his medal application. And needless to say, it took a lot of respect away from him for those of us who were there to see what actually happened. How do you counter this? You give the glory to your people. It works like this. When your people succeed, it's because of their great work. When they fail, it's because of your leadership. When the people do well, make sure they get the credit for it. Push them out there. Make sure that they get to bask in the glory of it. You will find that they are willing to share the successes with you, but make sure they get recognized first and foremost, and that will increase your leadership. But do it for the right reasons. As we wrap up, let me just tell you this, that people are watching, and what we do matters as leaders, and we can learn a great deal from rotten leadership and learning from these awful leaders. Take these little tips that I've given you and apply them to your leadership context and see how your leadership improves. And next time you have a rotten leadership example, see how you can turn that around and learn from it. Hey, this is Sam from Southwestern College Professional Studies. Let me know if I can be of help to you. I can be reached at samuel.o'donnell@sccans.edu. So long for now.